Hello, I'm Fatima Attarwala, Editor Business Finance in Dawn. With me is Nasir Jamal, Senior Economic Journalist as well as Bureau Chief of Lahore for Dawn. Today we'll be discussing the topic that I think most people in Pakistan are worried about, the electricity bills. Uh, all across the country there have been protests. People have been burning bills uh, because of the recent rate hike. Yesterday, Prime Minister had a meeting with the journalists in which he explained that the issue started from the 90s when there was massive load shedding. I don't know whether the Gen Z remember that era, but the millennials and the boomers and the Gen X remember the hours and hours and hours that we had to go without electricity. At that time, the contracts that brought in the independent power producers, the IPPs, seemed like a very easy, very quick solution. But over the decades, the dependence on imported fuels and coal and LNG has caused the current crisis. According to the Prime Minister, the fuel makeup was such that it depended on imported fuels and domestic resources of gas, which has been depleted. So as the population grows and the demand grows and the number of ACs in people's homes increase, Pakistan's power generation cannot keep up with it. I would like Nasir to answer as to what led to this crisis, the decisions taken by PMLN back in the 90s, and the cause of the circular debt.
Fatma, there is, this is a very complicated issue, and there are multiple factors that are responsible for the crisis that we are seeing today. Mm-hmm. And the crisis, actually, briefly, I'll say that crisis was caused by lack of planning in 70s and in 80s. And I don't know, how many people remember that we started to, experience this load shedding or blackouts in the 1980s during General Ziaul's era. And then the situation started to worsen in the early 1990s. So before, and it was probably in 1994 that Benazir Bhutto's second government signed a few contracts for thermal power generation, like with HUBCO. So, and that was actually her government gave the first energy policy at that time. So before that, the share of thermal power was negligible in our entire system.
Thermal power is coal, gas, and oil. Just for
it's anything. It's anything except barring water, hydroelectric power, and solar and other renewables. So gas, coal, oil, furnace oil, everything comes into in the category of thermal power. So that, and I think at that time they gave the investors some guaranteed profit. They promised guaranteed profit, and they didn't have any choice because it was kind of an emergency situation where we didn't have any electricity, and we needed that for growth, for industry, for households, and for everything. And then the first thermal power plant came into operations, started operations in 1997. Then came Nawaz's second government, and they started investigating against the investors who had invested in generation under that 1994 policy. And we saw, investors, being harassed, and we saw HUBCO shares fall to, you could buy a HUBCO share for I think rupee 1, and nobody even at that price, nobody was really interested in that share. And Then came Musharraf, and they gave a 2002 policy. And when they announced this policy, they gave more incentives to the investors, because the investment risk had increased after this accountability drive of Nawaz against the power generators. So after that, we saw some companies it was like 10 or 12 companies that set up their generation plants, and all were thermal power. And thermal power, why thermal power? Because it took more like 2 to 3 years to set up a plant and become operational. When you go into hydropower, its cost is very high, and it takes like 6 to 7 years to become operational. And at that time, renewables were really very expensive. At that time, a solar plant was unaffordable for any private sector investor, or even for government. So we saw between 1994 and 2010-11, when the plants, the generators that were set up under the 2002 power policy came into operation fully. And we saw that the problem had reduced a bit, but not totally, not completely. And then we had the old plants going out of operation. And then we saw that, and if you remember, at that time, in 2008, there was a financial crisis globally, and Pakistan was also, affected by that. And at that time, the oil prices in the world market also surged, like 100 to like 149.50 dollars a barrel. So the price of electricity also went up. And then we had a gas crisis because we had no new gas discoveries, and the old ones were really diverted to the households. So that, and when Nawaz came, in 2013, we were kind of facing a electricity shortfall of like 12,000 to 18,000 megawatts. So their focus, when they signed CPEC agreement with China, their focus was totally on generation, and they did it, and they added something like 10 to 12,000 megawatts of new electricity in the system, which is still, some of the projects are still, coming into operation. And this crisis, in 1994, if we look at the incentives, if you gave the investors like 10 rupees per unit, then in 2002 you had to give them like 2000 under 2002 policy, you had to give them 16 rupees or 17 rupees guaranteed 17% guaranteed profit. And when Chinese investors came, some of them were given like 28% or even more than that. Otherwise, they were not ready to invest. And that is because every time we plan for generation, we plan during emergency situations, when we have a big problem at hand, and it's just that we want somebody to invest and help us solve that problem. So in that situation, and when the country risk is very high, because this accountability drives, because of this geographical issues, because of this war on terror and law and order situation, and this balance of payment situation every few days, every few years. So the investor wants more guaranteed, and when you are not able to pay them their expense on time, so they want more and more and more guaranteed profits, and that is what has happened with us. So we have that is one factor that we are facing this crisis today. And secondly,
if I understand correctly, you're saying that because the crisis in Pakistan is high risk, Pakistan promised high profits, guaranteed profits to the IPPs, and to pay those guaranteed profits is part of the reason why we are under circle debt and why the cost of generation and the electricity bills have gotten so high.
Circular debt is a different thing. I mean, if you are paying them like, if they, for example, if HUBCO is producing electricity with oil, furnace oil, or anything, and you determine its tariff based on the pricing and everything, investment, and you say that the government says that we will give you 7 rupees per unit, and they agree that okay, you give us 7 rupees per unit and we are going to set up this plant. Fine. And that 7 rupees includes 17% guaranteed profit for them. I mean, their cost is like, for example, 83% is their cost and 17% is their profit from every 100 rupees. So, I mean, that is not the big issue. I mean, it's definitely an issue, because if we had a competitive market, maybe HUBCO would have agreed to set up the plant at a 10% profit or 5% profit or 6% profit. But I mean, since there was no competitive biddings, and we were in a hurry to set up the plant, we needed that plant to become operational in 2 years, 3 years. So we agreed to give them 17 or 18 or 19%, whatever the rate was. See, right. So this is not the problem. I mean, not the main problem. I don't think so. I mean, secondly, the issue of capacity payments is very much blamed for this crisis. I think that is also not the issue.
Can you explain capacity payments? How do they, why are they there, and how do they impact the circular debt?
Sorry?
Can you explain capacity payments? What the mechanism is and
capacity
how they
payments
impact?
Capacity. I mean, every generation plant has two types of expenditure. One is fixed expenditure, and the other is running expenditure. So the running expenditure is like purchasing fuel and running the using that fuel to produce electricity. So whatever that whatever they spend on that is running expenditure. And the other is fixed cost. If they, when they set up a plant, they borrow money from banks. They have to pay interest. They have to pay principal amount. So that is basically the capacity payment. So we in every this is not Pakistan specific phenomenon. Wherever such plants are set up, and wherever government is the sole purchaser, they agree to pay this capacity payment. Otherwise, if a plant is set up in private sector and they sell to multiple buyers, whether that is government or whether that is their problem, how to keep running their plant, or how to recover their investment, etc., etc. But when the sole purchaser is the government, and you set up that plant at the behest of the government, on the request of the government, then you expect that government will pay these capacity payments. So when a plant is running at its full capacity, then the share of capacity payments is like negligible. That doesn't hurt you. But when the plant is idle and it is not, it's a 100.
But
if a
why
100
are our
megawatt
plants
plant,
idle? When we have so much demand for electricity, why are our plants idle?
So yeah, so when the plant is not, producing electricity, then they have to meet their fixed cost, and government has to pay those costs. That is capacity payment, and they have to. So that definitely, as new projects come into operation, the size of capacity payments also increases, and it's a big. It becomes a big
Why
burden
are
on.
our plants idle when we have so much demand for electricity and when there's so much load shedding?
There are two reasons for that. Number one, when you plan generation, you plan it. It doesn't. If you plan 40,000 megawatt of generation, it doesn't mean that you will be able to consume 40,000 megawatts. No, because there are seasonal changes in electricity consumption. For example, in winter you have very, very low consumption of electricity. In summer it peaks. So there are plants. So you make a merit list that okay, we are going to use such and such plants because they are more efficient, they are more they cost you less, they are cheaper, and you leave out the expensive plants and less efficient plants, and so redundancy is always there in every place. In Pakistan, the redundancy has increased because our industry is not expanding. Industry in other countries is the major buyer of electricity, major consumer of electricity. In Pakistan, it's the reverse. The households are the major electricity consumers, and industry is not. So you see the redundancy increase substantially in winter. If we had industry, this redundancy would have not been so large even in winter, and in summer we may be needed more generation. At this time we have surplus generation. So that is the answer to your question. So that is one another reason for the crisis, for the power crisis that we see in Pakistan. But when we talk about the prices, and when we talk about the cost of electricity, it's because of two main things. Number one is the taxes on it. Different kinds of taxes, different kinds of levies, and we see that if the electricity is like today, if the electricity is costing on average rupees 20 per unit, then it is costing the consumer 30 rupees, almost rupees 30 or 29. Like we have government charges, government taxes. The incidence is like 30% of the total bill you pay. So whenever your consumption increases, your taxes increase, and you have to pay more. So that is the one thing. And second thing is that the average price of a unit is 20, and when you Pepco or Discos, they sell 1,000 units to consumers all over the country. So that means they must be billing to the consumers like 20,000 and plus taxes. If we add taxes, like 29,000 rupees. So they bill it, but they cannot recover all of this amount, because a lot of electricity is stolen on the way, and a lot of bills cannot be recovered because of law and order. And there's a lot of electricity that the government is providing free, like in the erstwhile tribal areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and there are places where subsidy is higher than the rest of Pakistan, like in AJK, Azad Kashmir. So that that gap is filled by in two ways. First, some part of that burden is put on us. Like if I use 10 units and I have to pay like 290 rupees, I will have to pay some part of that which is not recovered or which is stolen, and that increases my tariff from 29 to like 33, 34. And then we have a very, very old distribution system. We have a very a very obsolete old technology distribution, and we have a large national grid, and lots of electricity is wasted during its while traveling from south to north.
So you're absolutely right, Nasir. There is a lot of transmission and distribution losses, and there's a lot of theft, and the captive market has to pay for that.
Yeah, and then the other way is like the government pays some subsidies, subsidies to fill that gap. And when even by transferring that burden to the consumers and paying subsidies, they are unable to recover the full cost, and that has built into the circular debt. So this is on the one side, it's a fiscal issue, and this price increase, and on the other, it's a governance issue, and we can add that our planning is bad, our planning is delayed, so that also add.
Thank you so much, Nasir. This is really informational. So the main points were that we cannot blame the 1990s or any one government for the current crisis. Different governments at different times have taken emergency measures, like what we seem to be taking right now, to solve the problem, which was a stopgap measure, a band-aid, which has snowballed into the current crisis today. Now, one of the problems is our idle capacity and the capacity payments. Another is the fact that previously we did not have the investment range to be able to set up renewables. And right now we do not have the fiscal space to set up renewables, which is why renewables are only 3% of our generation, while thermal is over 60%, that is oil, gas, and coal. A lot of the problem, a lot of high electricity bills stem from the taxes because of the captive market. The middle income group have to pay the electricity bills to get electricity, which is being subsidized for some areas such as Azad, Jammu and Kashmir. And because of our fiscal deficit, a lot of taxes are levied on us, which increases the cost of our electricity bills a lot. So basically, it's a series of bad governance decisions and emergency measures that have led to the current crisis today.